His lawyer leaned in and whispered 5 words. Just 5. I couldn't hear them from where I sat on the other side of the mahogany conference table, but I didn't need to. The reaction was visceral. Preston's face, that handsome, smug, self-satisfied face I had stared at across the breakfast table for 15 years, went completely white. It was like watching the blood drain out of a corpse. His hands, usually so steady when gripping a Scotch glass or a steering wheel, started trembling. The papers he had been so eager to sign were shaking like autumn leaves in a storm. And me, for the first time in 3 years, I smiled. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That moment in the lawyer's office was the finish line. To understand the sheer, intoxicating sweetness of that smile, you need to understand the marathon that came before it. You need to understand how we got here. How a woman everyone thought had lost her mind, a boring housewife with no career and no prospects, actually played the longest, most patient game of her life. My name is Mallory Vance. I'm 34 years old, and until 3 months ago, I was Mrs. Preston Sterling. 15 years of marriage. That's longer than most Hollywood relationships, longer than some tech startups last, and definitely longer than my patience should have held out. But I'm a stubborn woman. I get it from my grandmother. Let's rewind. Let's go back to the night my life officially imploded. It was a Tuesday. I remember that specifically because Tuesdays were for braised short ribs. It was Preston's favorite meal, slow-cooked for 6 hours in red wine and rosemary until the meat fell off the bone. The kitchen smelled rich and earthy, the kind of smell that usually signals comfort and home. I had just set the table, aligning the silverware perfectly, because Preston hated it when the fork was crooked. The garage door rumbled open at 7:15 p.m., right on schedule. He walked in, loosening his tie, but he didn't greet me. He didn't sniff the air and ask what was for dinner. He didn't ask about Caleb's math test. He just walked past me, placed his briefcase on the counter, and sat down at the head of the table. "Sit down, Mallory," he said. It wasn't a request. It was a directive, the same tone he used with underperforming contractors. I wiped my hands on my apron, my grandmother's vintage floral apron, and sat. "I want a divorce," he said. He didn't lead up to it. He didn't soften the blow. He said it between the salt shaker and the butter dish, as casually as if he were commenting on the weather. I stared at him. The air in the kitchen seemed to vanish. "What?" "I want a divorce," he repeated, looking at his cuticles. "I've had the papers drawn up. I want the house, the cars, the business, and the vacation property. You can keep Caleb." He said it like he was ordering from a menu at a steakhouse. "I'll have the assets. Hold the child. Thanks." My stomach turned over. You want to keep the house and the business." "I built them," Preston said, finally meeting my eyes. His gaze was flat, devoid of any history, any love. "They are mine. I'm willing to give you a small cash settlement to get you set up in an apartment somewhere. But the Sterling Empire is mine. And honestly, Mallory, Caleb is a lot right now. He needs his mother. I have a business to run. It just makes sense for you to take him." Keep Caleb. Like our 15-year-old son was a leftover casserole. Like he was an inconvenience being graciously allowed to stay with the help. I sat there, frozen, while the smell of the burning short ribs started to drift from the oven. I had forgotten to turn it off. 15 years of marriage, and this was how it ended. Not with a fight, not with tears, but with a business transaction conducted by a man who looked at me like I was a depreciating asset he needed to offload before the fiscal year ended. What I didn't know in that moment, what I wouldn't find out until later, was that Preston had been planning this for months. He already had a lawyer, Arthur Pendleton, expensive, aggressive, and experienced. Preston had been building his exit strategy while I was meal prepping and scheduling his dentist appointments. I had been blindsided by a man I'd trusted with my life. But here's the thing about me. I wasn't always just Preston's wife. I met Preston when I was 17. I had graduated high school early. Not because I was some kind of child prodigy, but because I was practical, motivated, and desperate to get out of my parents' house. My parents were good people, but they were chaotic, bad with money, and emotionally draining. I wanted order. I wanted control. I got a job at Henderson and Price, a mid-sized law firm downtown, as a file clerk. Minimum wage, maximum paper cuts. But it was asterisk mine asterisk. By 18, I had worked my way up to legal assistant. I was good with details. I was good with numbers. I was good at keeping my mouth shut and my eyes open. My grandmother, Nana Rose, was my anchor back then. She was a woman who had lived through the Depression and a bad marriage, and she had one rule that she drilled into my head over Sunday tea. "Mallory," she'd say, tapping her cane on the floor, "a woman should always have her own money. Not secret money, don't be deceitful, but asterisk separate asterisk money. Money nobody can touch. Money that says, I can leave if I need to." I took that to heart. While my friends were buying fast fashion and concert tickets, I was hoarding cash in a high-yield savings account. Then came Preston. He was 24 when we met at a client mixer the law firm was hosting. He was dazzling. There's no other word for it. He was ambitious, charming, and full of dreams about building a real estate empire that would reshape the city. He talked about the future like it was already his, like success was just waiting for him to show up and claim it. He told me he was going to build skyscrapers. He told me he was going to be a king. "I need a queen," he had whispered to me that night, his blue eyes locking onto mine. "Someone who can handle the details while I handle the vision." I was 19. I was flattered. I was in love with the potential of him. We got married 6 months later. Caleb came along when I was 20. I kept working at the law firm part-time while raising our son, building up my 401k, saving every spare dollar. But when I was 23, Preston's business finally started to take off. It was growing too fast for him to handle alone. "Quit the firm," he told me one night. "Come help me. I need someone I can trust to handle the books, the contractors, the clients. We can build this together, Mallory. Sterling Real Estate, our legacy." So I did. I quit my job. I rolled my 401k over and didn't touch it, and I became his unpaid everything. For 11 years, I poured myself into that company. My official title was wife, but my actual job description was bookkeeper, office manager, HR department, client liaison, interior decorator for model homes, marketing coordinator, and event planner. I managed the contractors when they tried to overcharge us. I smoothed things over with angry clients when Preston overpromised and undelivered. I staged the houses that sold for millions. I balanced the books down to the penny, often staying up until 2:00 a.m. to make sure the accounts reconciled while Preston slept soundly upstairs. I did it all while raising Caleb, managing our household, and somehow keeping everyone fed and reasonably happy. And for 11 years, Preston got the credit. I remember the industry gala last year. It was a black tie event at the Ritz. Preston was receiving the Developer of the Year award. I was wearing a navy gown that pinched at the waist, my feet throbbing in heels I bought because Preston said they made my legs look longer. He stood at the podium, holding the crystal trophy, the spotlight gleaming off his perfect teeth. "I built this from nothing," he told the crowd, his voice thick with emotion. "Just me, a truck, and a dream. It takes grit to be a self-made man. I'd like to thank my team, my mentors, and of course, my vision." He didn't mention me, not once. I stood at the table, clapping until my hands stung. A junior associate from a rival firm bumped into me, spilling a little champagne on my dress. "Oh, excuse me," he mumbled, not even looking at my face. "Could you shift to the left? You're blocking the view of Mr. Sterling." I was blocking the view. That's what I had become, an obstruction to his glory. Whatever partnership we'd had in the beginning had dissolved slowly, eroded by his growing ego. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being his partner and started being his employee. An employee he couldn't fire, so he just started resenting me instead. He started making decisions without consulting me. He bought a Porsche without asking. He invested in risky commercial lots I warned him against, and the criticism. It started small. "Why are you wearing that?" he'd ask as we were leaving for dinner. "It looks frumpy. You represent the brand, Mallory. Try harder." "The chicken is dry again," he'd sigh, pushing his plate away. "I work 12 hours a day. Is a decent meal too much to ask?" But the worst was the accusation about ambition. "You just don't get it," he told me a few months ago when I questioned a suspicious withdrawal from the business account. "You have no ambition, Mallory. You're happy just existing. I'm trying to conquer the world and you're worried about paperwork. You're small-minded." Small-minded. Me, the woman running his entire back office for free. The woman raising his son. The woman who made sure his taxes were paid so the IRS didn't throw him in jail. But sure, I wasn't ambitious enough. So that Tuesday night when he dropped the bomb, I shouldn't have been surprised. In retrospect, the signs were all there. The late nights at the office. The new passcode on his phone. The way he looked at me with bored contempt. "I'm moving you to the guest room tonight," Preston said, standing up from the table. The short ribs were still in the oven, burning to charcoal. "I have meetings early tomorrow. I need my sleep." He walked out of the kitchen. He didn't look back. He went upstairs to the master bedroom, the room with the curtains I had sewn, the bed I had picked out, and closed the door. I sat alone in the kitchen for a long time. The house was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. I looked at the salt shaker. I looked at the butter dish. I looked at the life I had built for 15 years, now reduced to a pile of assets he was claiming for himself. He thought I was weak. He thought I was just a file clerk he'd married young. He thought that because I had been silent for years, I didn't have a voice. He was wrong. The next day, the cavalry arrived, or rather, the vulture. Genevieve Sterling, Preston's mother, showed up at 10:00 a.m. sharp. Genevieve was a woman who had treated me like the help since the day I met her. She arrived with her perfectly coiffed silver hair, a Chanel bag that cost more than my first car, and her practiced sympathy face. She let herself in with the key I should have taken back years ago. She found me in the kitchen, packing boxes. Preston had told me I needed to clear my things out of the master suite immediately. "Oh, Mallory," she sighed, drifting into the room in a cloud of heavy floral perfume. She didn't hug me. She just patted my arm, her rings cold against my skin. "I heard the news, such a shame." "Hello, Genevieve," I said, focusing on wrapping a picture frame in bubble wrap. "You know," she said, pulling out a stool and sitting down to watch me work. "I always told Preston he needed a woman who could keep up with him. He's a stallion, dear. You can't expect a stallion to stay in the stable if the gate is left open." I paused. "Are you saying this is my fault?" She tutted softly, inspecting her manicure. "I'm just saying men have needs. Preston is a powerful man. He needs excitement. He needs a muse. You've always been so domestic. Maybe if you had tried harder to keep yourself interesting, we wouldn't be here." Lorraine's advice on marriage was fascinating, considering her own husband spent 7 days a week on the golf course specifically to avoid being in the same room as her. But in her mind, the Sterling men were gods, and the women who married them were lucky supplicants who should be grateful for the crumbs. "He wants the house, Genevieve," I said quietly, "and the business, and the cars. He wants everything." "Well, naturally," she said, blinking as if I were simple. "It's his legacy. The Sterling name is on the sign, isn't it? You'll be fine, dear. You're scrappy. You've always been capable. You can go back to that little law firm, right?" She looked around my kitchen, the kitchen I had designed, the heart of the home where I had raised her grandson, and smiled. A thin, predatory smile. "Besides," she added, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, "it's for the best. Preston needs a fresh start, someone who fits his new status. You understand, don't you?" I looked at her. I looked at the woman who was watching her daughter-in-law pack her life into cardboard boxes and enjoying every second of it. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I understand perfectly." And I did. I understood that the gloves were off. I understood that decency had left the building a long time ago. Genevieve thought she was talking to a defeated woman. Preston thought he was discarding a used appliance. But they had forgotten one crucial detail. I wasn't just the wife. I was the bookkeeper. And bookkeepers know asterisk everything. The guest room became my cell. It was a small, beige room on the first floor that we had originally designated for Preston's distant relatives, or the occasional drunk dinner guest who couldn't drive home. The mattress was too soft, the pillows smelled like stale linen spray, and the window looked out onto the AC unit. Preston had established the new rules of engagement within 24 hours of asking for the divorce. "I need the master suite," he'd said, blocking the doorway with his arm when I tried to go in to get my moisturizer. "I have important calls. I need my rest. You can sleep downstairs until we sort out your living situation." My world, which had once encompassed a 4-bedroom colonial in the best school district, a blooming garden, and a home office, had suddenly shrunk to 12 by 12 feet. My closet, my beautiful walk-in closet with the custom shelving I had installed myself, was now off limits. Preston allowed me to take essentials. So there I was, a 34-year-old woman, living out of a rolling garment rack squeezed into the corner of the guest room. 2 pairs of jeans, 3 blouses, my pajamas, and a blazer. Every morning, I woke up to the sound of Preston's footsteps on the floorboards above me. Heavy, dominant, claiming the space. It was a physical reminder that I was now a guest in my own life, a squatter in the empire I helped build. But the displacement was manageable. I could handle a bad mattress. I could handle the humiliation of brushing my teeth in the tiny powder room sink. What I couldn't handle was the invasion. It happened 2 weeks in. I was in the kitchen, making toast. I tried to make myself as small as possible these days, eating quickly over the sink to avoid taking up space at the table. The front door opened. I froze. It was 10:00 a.m. on a Wednesday. Preston should have been at the office. "Come on in, babe. Don't worry, the housekeeper is probably gone by now." The housekeeper. My spine stiffened. I turned around just as they walked into the kitchen. Preston was there, looking energized, wearing a suit I'd picked up from the dry cleaners 3 days ago, and holding his hand was her. Tinsley Ray. I knew who she was immediately. She was the marketing consultant Preston had hired 6 months ago, 27 years old, the kind of beauty that felt aggressive, perfectly highlighted blonde hair, teeth so white they looked like porcelain, and a body sculpted by Pilates and expensive juice cleanses. She was wearing Lululemon yoga pants that cost more than my weekly grocery budget and a cropped hoodie that showed a sliver of tanned skin. She looked like an Instagram filter come to life. She stopped when she saw me. Her eyes widened, not in shame, but in mild annoyance, like she'd found a spider in the bathtub. "Oh," she said. Her voice was vocal fry and sugar. "I thought you said she was out." "I thought she was," Preston said, not even looking at me. He walked past me to the fridge, grabbing a bottle of sparkling water. "Mallory, I thought you had errands." "I live here, Preston," I said, my voice sounding thin in the cavernous kitchen. "For now," he corrected. He turned to Tinsley and smiled, a genuine, dazzling smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. "Babe, do you want that smoothie? The blender is in the cabinet to the left." Tinsley perked up. She walked into my kitchen, my workspace, my sanctuary, like she held the deed. She opened the cabinet I had organized. She took out the Vitamix I had asked for as a Christmas gift 3 years ago. "Do you have any kale?" she asked, looking at me. "And maybe some chia seeds." I stared at her. The audacity was so sharp it almost drew blood. She was asking the wife she was displacing for smoothie ingredients. "Pantry, second shelf," I whispered. Tinsley found the ingredients. Then, she did something that made my vision blur with red. She saw my apron hanging on the hook by the pantry. It wasn't just an apron. It was Nana Rose's apron, a faded, floral vintage piece from the 1950s. It had a small tear in the pocket and smelled faintly of lavender and old flour. It was the one thing I wore when I needed to feel my grandmother's strength. Tinsley grabbed it. "Cute," she chirped. She tied it around her waist. It was too big for her. She had to double knot the strings. "Please don't," I started to say, taking a step forward. "That's my grandmother." "Relax, Mallory," Preston snapped, leaning against the island. "She's just trying not to get green juice on her clothes. Don't be petty." Petty? I watched, paralyzed, as Tinsley Ray stood in my kitchen, wearing my dead grandmother's apron, dumping kale into my blender. The noise of the machine roared to life, drowning out the sound of my heart breaking. Whirr. She poured 2 glasses. She handed one to Preston. He took a sip, then leaned in and kissed her, right there, in front of the sink where I had washed his dishes for 15 years, in front of the oven where I had cooked his meals. He put his hand on the small of her back, possessive and proud. He looked at her like she was the prize he had finally won, and I was just the packaging he had discarded on the floor. "Let's go to the sunroom," Preston said to her, turning his back on me. "Better light." They walked out. Tinsley left the dirty blender on the counter. She left Nana's apron in a crumpled heap next to the sink, stained with a drop of green sludge. I walked over, picked up the apron, and pressed it to my face. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I was too busy learning a new emotion, pure, cold hatred. The humiliation escalated daily. First, he canceled my personal credit card. "We need to separate finances," he said via text. Then the joint card was declined at the grocery store while I was buying milk for Caleb. The cashier, a girl I'd known for years, looked at me with pity. "It says, report stolen." Then came the purge. "You have too much stuff," Preston announced a week later. "If you want that settlement money, you need to be out by the end of the month. Mom is coming over to help you expedite the process." Genevieve, of course. She arrived with a box of heavy-duty black garbage bags. Not moving boxes, garbage bags. "We need to be efficient, Mallory," Genevieve said, marching into the living room. "Tinsley is planning to redecorate. She has such a modern eye, doesn't she? And we can't have all this clutter." By clutter, she meant my life. She went through the bookshelves. "These are Preston's," she said, sweeping his business books into a keep pile. "These paperbacks, trash." She swept my novels into a black bag. She went to the china cabinet. "Wedding gifts are marital property," she declared, blocking me from the crystal stemware. "And since Preston paid for the house, the decor stays." "I picked that crystal out," I said, my voice trembling. "My aunt gave us those candlesticks." "But they were given to the asterisk couple asterisk," Genevieve explained, her voice dripping with condescension. "And the couple is dissolving. Preston needs to maintain the household standards for his entertaining." We reached the kitchen. I watched her open the cabinet above the stove. She pulled out the wooden recipe box. It was beaten up, grease-stained, and held together with tape. Inside were 3 generations of handwritten index cards. Nana Rose's apple pie, my mother's chili, the first birthday cake I ever made for Caleb. Genevieve held it up, wrinkling her nose. "Well, this is filthy. Tinsley won't want this germ trap in her kitchen." She moved to toss it into the garbage bag. "No." I lunged. It was instinct. I grabbed Genevieve's wrist. Her eyes went wide. I had never touched her. I had never raised my voice to her. "Let go of me," she squawked, pulling back. "Give me the box," I snarled. I ripped it from her hand. The box flew open, and index cards scattered across the linoleum floor. Genevieve rubbed her wrist, looking at me like I was a feral animal. "My God, Mallory, you're hysterical. No wonder Preston wants out. You're unstable." I dropped to my knees, frantically gathering the cards. Nana's biscuits, Caleb's cookies. I clutched them to my chest. "Get out," I whispered from the floor. "Excuse me." "Get out of my face, Genevieve, before I show you just how unstable I can be." She sniffed, adjusted her blazer, and stepped over me. "I'll just tell Preston you were uncooperative. Again." She left me on the floor, surrounded by recipes and garbage bags. I felt like trash. I felt like I had been stripped of my dignity, layer by layer, until there was nothing left but raw nerves. Through all of this, I had one lifeline, Harper Finch. We had been best friends since high school, 20 years of friendship, through bad haircuts, college breakups, pregnancy scares, and the birth of our children. She was the godmother to Caleb. She was the first person I called after Preston dropped the bomb. She was amazing. She came over with wine. She let me cry. She called me every day to check in. "He's a monster, Mal," she'd say on the phone. You deserve so much better. Tell me everything. What's his lawyer saying? What's your plan? I told her everything. I told her I was thinking about fighting for the house. I told her I found a potential apartment on 5th Street that was affordable. I told her I was scared. Don't worry, Harper soothed. I'm here, just focus on you. Is he saying anything about me or us? I thought she was just being protective. But then the coincidences started. I told Harper on Tuesday that I was going to fight for the antique armoire in the master bedroom. On Wednesday morning, Preston had the armoire moved to a storage unit for safekeeping. I told Harper I was looking at the apartment on 5th Street. That night, Preston smirked at me in the hallway. Don't bother with the west side, Mallory. 5th Street is dangerous. You don't want Caleb in a neighborhood like that. I hadn't told Preston about 5th Street. The realization hit me on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I was scrolling through old photos on my laptop, looking for files to save, and I found a folder from a barbecue we hosted 5 years ago. There was a video. Preston was telling a joke, a bad, arrogant joke about a contractor. In the background of the frame, I saw Harper. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking at Preston. Her expression, it was raw. It was hungry. She was laughing too hard, her hand touching her neck, her eyes locked on him with a kind of desperate adoration I recognized, because I used to look at him that way. The pieces clicked into place, the way Harper always asked, "How, Preston?" before she asked, "How are you?" The way she always dressed up a little too much when she came over for dinner. The way she defended him just a little, even when he was wrong. He's just stressed, Mal. He has a lot on his shoulders. My best friend wasn't my lifeline. She was his spy. She had been carrying a torch for my husband for 20 years. And Preston, because he collected admirers like some people collect stamps, he knew. He had probably fed her crumbs of attention for years, and now he was using her to dismantle me. I felt physically sick. The betrayal cut deeper than Tinsley. Tinsley was a stranger. She owed me nothing. Harper was my sister, and she had sold me out for a chance to be the next Mrs. Sterling. At least charge more, Harper, I whispered to the empty room. You sold 20 years of friendship for a man who will never love you. But the final blow, the one that actually brought me to my knees, was Caleb. My son was 15. It's a hard age. They are half men, half boys, trying to figure out who they are, and Preston was working on him. Preston took Caleb to basketball games. He bought him the new iPhone I had said we couldn't afford, and he talked. I picked Caleb up from school on a Friday. He got into the passenger seat of my 10-year-old sedan and slammed the door. Hey, bud, I said, trying to keep my voice cheerful. How was practice? Fine, he grunted, staring out the window. I was thinking we could grab pizza tonight, maybe watch a movie. He turned to me, and his eyes, Preston's blue eyes, were cold. Dad said you're trying to take the business. I gripped the steering wheel. Caleb, adult conversations are complicated. I'm just trying to make sure we're okay. He says you're being difficult, Caleb said, his voice rising. He says he wants to be generous, but you're dragging it out because you're bitter. He says if you keep fighting, we might lose the lake house. I love the lake house. Caleb, that is not true. Your father is. Stop, Caleb shouted. Just stop trash-talking him. He's trying to build something for us. Why do you have to ruin everything? Why can't you just let him be happy? The silence in the car was deafening. My son looked at me like I was the villain, like I was the obstacle to his happiness. Preston had successfully weaponized our child against me. He had bought his loyalty with iPhones and lies. I pulled the car over. I couldn't drive. My hands were shaking too hard. Okay, I said quietly. Okay, Caleb. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself, because I realized in that moment that I couldn't win this with words. Preston was louder. Preston was richer. Preston was a master manipulator. If I fought him openly, I would lose my son. If I screamed and cried, I would be the crazy ex-wife Genevieve said I was. I needed a different weapon. I dropped Caleb off at home, went to the guest room, and closed the door. I sat on the lumpy mattress and stared at the wall. I was done crying. I was done begging. I was done being the victim. I pulled out my phone. I didn't call Harper. I searched for a name I remembered from my days at the law firm, a name that made grown men nervous. Rosalind Burke, family law. Her nickname at the firm was the Barracuda. She was expensive, she was ruthless, and she absolutely hated men like Preston Sterling. I dialed the number. Law office of Rosalind Burke, a receptionist answered. "This is Mallory Vance," I said, using my maiden name for the first time in 15 years. My voice didn't shake. "I need an appointment, and tell Roz to clear her schedule. I have a case that's going to make her very, very happy." Preston thought he had stripped me of everything. He thought I was naked, vulnerable, and alone. He forgot that, when you strip someone of everything they have to lose, you make them dangerous. He wanted a war, okay, but he brought a knife to a nuclear testing site. He just didn't know it yet. Roz Burke's office smelled of expensive leather, intimidating legal precedents, and blood. Metaphorically speaking, of course. She was the kind of lawyer you hired when you wanted to scorch the earth so thoroughly that nothing would grow on it for a generation. She sat behind a desk that looked like it had been carved from the hull of a pirate ship, tapping a manicured fingernail against a glass of water. She was 52, sharp as a razor, with a bob cut so precise it looked like it could cut glass. "Mrs. Sterling," she said, using the name I was about to shed like a snake sheds dead skin. "I've reviewed the initial proposal from your husband's attorney. It's insulting. He's offering you a pittance. He wants full custody of the assets, the business, the properties. He's offering you a cash settlement that wouldn't cover a Honda Civic." She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Now, usually this is the part where the client cries. Then I hand them a tissue and then we go to war. I'm ready to fight for half, Mallory. You helped build that business. We can subpoena the records. We can drag this out, but you have to want to fight." I didn't cry. I didn't reach for the tissue box sitting strategically on the corner of her desk. Instead, I reached into my tote bag. I pulled out 3 heavy, black binders. They hit the polished wood of her desk with a heavy, satisfying asterisk thud. "I don't want to fight for half, Roz," I said calmly. Roz blinked, looking at the binders, then back at me. "I'm sorry, you want to just give up." "No," I said. "I want to give him exactly what he's asking for." I opened the first binder. It was color-coded. Tabs for mortgages, tabs for lines of credit, tabs for hidden accounts. It was a masterpiece of forensic accounting. 3 years, I said. "That's how long I've been tracking the numbers. Preston thinks he's fighting to keep his empire. He thinks he's shutting me out of a gold mine." I slid the binder toward her. "He's actually fighting to keep a sinkhole." Roz put on her reading glasses. She opened the binder. For the first 5 minutes, the only sound in the room was the turning of pages and the soft hum of the air conditioning. I watched her face. It went from professional boredom to confusion, and then, slowly, to absolute shock. She stopped on a page detailing the 3rd mortgage on the family home. She looked up at me. "He's underwater," she whispered. "By $300,000 on the house alone," I clarified. "And that's just the beginning. Keep reading." She flipped to the business section. The equipment loans, the vendor debts, tax liens. "He hasn't paid quarterly payroll taxes in 14 months, I said. "He's been shuffling money from new construction loans to pay off old gambling debts. It's a Ponzi scheme of one." Roz closed the binder. She took off her glasses and looked at me. The pity was gone. The poor little housewife narrative had evaporated. In its place was something else. Respect, maybe even a little bit of fear. "You've known about this for 3 years. "I was the bookkeeper, Roz. I knew before he did. He thinks he's just having a cash flow problem. He thinks one big deal will fix it, but the math doesn't work. The interest rates are eating him alive." "So when he demands the assets," Roz started, a slow smile spreading across her face. "He demands the liabilities," I finished. "The divorce agreement states that whoever retains the asset retains all associated debt and encumbrances. If I fight him for the house, I inherit half the mortgage. If I walk away, he keeps it all." "And you?" she asked. "What about you?" "My grandmother left me an inheritance, and I have my IRA from before the marriage. Separate property, never commingled. It's all sitting in an irrevocable trust for Caleb, untouchable." Roz leaned back in her chair, clasping her hands together. She let out a low whistle. "Mrs. Sterling," she said, her voice dropping an octave, "I believe I owe you an apology. I thought you were a victim. I didn't realize I was sitting across from a grandmaster." I smoothed my skirt. "I prefer grandmaster, better outfit." "So," Roz said, opening her legal pad with renewed energy, "the strategy is surrender." "Total surrender," I said. "I need to look broken. I need to look defeated. I need him to think he's won the lottery right up until he signs the ticket." 3 years. That's how long I'd been carrying this secret. That's how long I'd known the truth about Preston Sterling and his glittering, glamorous, completely fake empire. It started on a random Tuesday night, 3 years before the divorce. Preston was working late again. I was in the home office, trying to reconcile the monthly QuickBooks file. I found a transfer that didn't look right. $5,000 to an LLC I didn't recognize, Apex Holdings. I was tired, but my instincts pricked up. I clicked on the vendor details. The address was a P.O. box in Nevada. I dug deeper. I pulled the bank statements, not just the ones Preston left on the desk, but the digital ones I had password access to because I was the one who set up the online banking. I followed the money. It was 3:00 a.m. The house was silent. Caleb was asleep down the hall, and I was staring at a computer screen that was telling me my life was a lie. Preston had been taking loans against everything we owned. The house, our beautiful colonial with the wraparound porch that everyone envied, had 3 mortgages on it. Original loan, $400,000. Second mortgage, HELOC, $350,000, taken out 4 years ago for business expansion. Third mortgage, private lender, $350,000, taken out 2 years ago at a predatory interest rate. Total debt on home, $1.1 million. Actual market value, $850,000. We were underwater by $250,000 on the home I thought we owned outright. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I went to the business accounts. It was worse. Lines of credit maxed out at $200,000. Back taxes owed, $85,000. Vendor debts, lumber, concrete, electricians, $120,000. Equipment loans for trucks we didn't even use anymore, $75,000. The company Preston bragged about at every cocktail party. It was drowning in nearly $500,000 of debt. But where had the money gone? We lived well, but not that well. I kept digging. The forensic trail led to places that made my stomach churn. Cryptocurrency, $180,000 transferred to various exchanges, all of it lost in the crash. Gambling, $75,000 in withdrawals at casinos in Atlantic City and online sports betting sites. Lifestyle, an apartment in the city I didn't know about, rented for $3,500 a month, furnished with high-end decor. That's where the late nights were spent. That's where the money went. My husband wasn't building an empire. He was building a house of cards with borrowed decks that were currently on fire. We looked rich the same way a movie set looks like a real town, convincing from the street, but just plywood and props from the back. My first instinct that night was to scream, to wake him up when he finally stumbled in at 4:00 a.m. and demand answers. I wanted to shake him. I wanted to save us. But then I looked at the numbers again. If I confronted him, he'd manipulate me. He'd gaslight me. He'd say it was temporary. He'd say I didn't understand high finance. Or worse, he'd try to access my money to plug the holes in his sinking ship. Nana Rose's voice echoed in my head. A woman should have her own money. I had my IRA, $180,000, and my inheritance, $340,000. Preston knew about them, but he considered them cute little savings accounts. He didn't know the specifics. So I didn't scream. I didn't wake him up. Instead, I became a ghost in my own marriage. I worked with my uncle, a retired CPA, to move my funds into an irrevocable trust for Caleb. I removed my name as a direct beneficiary. I made sure Preston's name was nowhere near the paperwork. Then I documented everything. Every loan, every signature, some of them looking suspiciously like he'd forged mine, every transfer. I saved it all on encrypted drives. And I waited. I knew men like Preston. Eventually, the pressure would get too high. Eventually, he would need to blame someone. Eventually, he would discard me for a younger model who didn't know he was broke. I just had to be ready to catch him when he fell and make sure he didn't land on me. Back in the present, the plan was in motion. The mediation sessions were a performance art piece. I stopped wearing concealer to hide the dark circles under my eyes. I wore slightly oversized cardigans that made me look smaller, frailer. I spoke softly, hesitantly. We sat in a sterile conference room. Preston sat next to Arthur Pendleton, looking victorious. He wore his power tie, crimson silk. He wouldn't look me in the eye. "We are prepared to offer Mrs. Sterling a one-time cash settlement of $50,000, Arthur said, sliding a paper across the table. "In exchange, Mr. Sterling retains the marital residence, the Sterling Group business entities, and all vehicles." Arthur looked ready for a fight. He had his pen poised, expecting Roz to laugh in his face. I looked at the paper. I let my hand tremble as I reached for my water glass. "50,000, I whispered. "Preston, how will I start over?" Preston sighed, checking his watch. "It's fair, Mallory. The business is tying up all my cash right now. You know how the market is. Honestly, I'm being generous." "I just want peace," I said, looking down at my lap. "I don't want to tear the family apart. I don't want to fight you, Preston. You're too powerful." I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. He loved hearing that. It fed the beast. "If I sign," I said, looking up at him with wide, watery eyes, "can I keep my personal items, Nana's furniture, my books?" "Fine," Preston said, waving a hand magnanimously. "Take the old stuff. I'm redecorating anyway." Roz kicked me gently under the table. It was her signal. Don't overdo it. "Okay," I said. "I'll accept it." Arthur Pendleton froze. He looked at his client, then at Roz, then at me. Excuse me, you accept?" "Yes," I said. "I just want it to be over." Arthur narrowed his eyes. He was a good lawyer. He knew this was too easy. "We'll need to draft the final agreement. It will include a full release of claims." "Draft it," Roz said, closing her notebook. "My client is tired, Arthur. She just wants to move on." We walked out of that room, and I could feel Preston's relief radiating off him like heat. He thought I was stupid. He thought I was weak. In the weeks leading up to the final hearing, Preston's arrogance went supernova. He stopped being careful entirely. He bought a new watch, a Breitling, retail price $15,000. I knew because I saw the charge hit the business Amex before I was locked out of the system. He was using company credit to buy jewelry while his vendors were suing him for unpaid invoices. He took Tinsley Ray to La Mason Asterisk for dinner. He posted it on Instagram, celebrating new chapters with the right people. A bottle of Dom Perignon sat on the table. Retail price, $300. He was celebrating his victory. He was toasting to his freedom. He was spending money he didn't have to impress a woman who only loved him because she thought he had money. The irony was so rich it gave me cavities. But while the adults were playing their games, Caleb was watching. My son had been staying with me in my new apartment on the weekends. It was a small 2-bedroom walk-up on 5th Street. The kitchen was the size of a closet. The living room could fit a sofa and a TV, but not both comfortably. Caleb sat at the small second-hand kitchen table, doing his homework. He had been quiet lately, watchful. "Mom," he asked, not looking up from his textbook. "Yeah, Bud." "Dad got a new car today, a Range Rover, leased." "That's nice," I said, stirring pasta sauce on the stove. And Tinsley has a new bag. It has that LV logo all over it. Okay. Caleb put his pencil down. He turned in his chair to look at me. He had Preston's jawline, but he had my eyes. And right now, those eyes were sharp. "Mom, you're eating generic cereal," he said, gesturing to the box on the counter. "And Dad is buying Range Rovers. But last week, when I asked him for the money for the Washington, D.C. school trip, he said things were tight. He said he couldn't swing the $600 right now." I stopped stirring. "He bought a $15,000 watch, but he can't pay for my history trip," Caleb asked. His voice wasn't angry, it was confused. It was the sound of an illusion shattering. Is Dad actually rich, or is he just pretending?" I turned off the stove. I walked over and sat opposite him. I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to show him the binders, but he was 15. He didn't need the burden of the math. He just needed the truth of the character. "What do you think, Caleb?" He looked down at his hands. I think he's lying about a lot of things. I think he's trying to look like a winner so nobody sees he's losing." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You are very smart," I whispered. "Smarter than your father gives you credit for." "Why are you letting him take everything?" Caleb asked, his voice cracking slightly. "Why are we living here while he has the mansion?" "Caleb, listen to me." I waited until he met my eyes. "I need you to trust me just for a little longer. I promise you we are going to be okay, better than okay. But I need to let him think he's winning. Can you do that? Can you just wait?" Caleb searched my face. He saw the resolve there. He saw the mother who had raised him, not the victim Preston painted me as. Slowly, he nodded. He got up and hugged me. It was a fierce, desperate hug. "I trust you, Mom." That was all the fuel I needed. The night before the final hearing, I was sitting on my floor, painting my toenails a dark, blood red. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a text from Preston. "See you in court tomorrow. Thanks for not making this ugly. It's better this way." I stared at the screen. The audacity. He was thanking me for rolling over. He was thanking me for letting him discard me efficiently. I picked up the phone. I typed back. "I just want everyone to get what they deserve, Preston." I hit send. He replied with a thumbs-up emoji. I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound in the empty apartment. He had no idea. He was walking into a slaughterhouse thinking it was a petting zoo, and he had signed the invitation himself. Thursday, April 17th, 9:00 a.m., courtroom 4B. I remember every granular detail of that morning. I remember the way the sunlight slanted through the tall, dust-moted windows, illuminating the floating particles like tiny stars. I remember the smell, a mix of lemon floor polish, old wood, and the stale anxiety that permeates every family court in America. This was the arena. This was where 15 years of marriage would officially end, and where 3 years of agonizing patience would finally pay off. Preston arrived first. Of course he did. He wanted to assert dominance over the space. He was standing by the plaintiff's table, laughing at something his lawyer, Arthur Pendleton, had said. Preston was wearing his closer suit, the charcoal Armani I had helped him pick out for a client dinner 3 years ago. It fit him perfectly, tapering at the waist, emphasizing the broad shoulders he worked so hard on at the gym. He looked like $1 million, which was ironic, considering he was about to be worth negative $300,000. Genevieve was there, too, sitting in the front row of the gallery. She had dressed for a coronation, not a divorce hearing. She wore a cream-colored Baukel suit and a string of pearls, clutching her Chanel bag like a shield. When I walked in, she gave me a small, tight smile, the kind of pitying look you give a dog that's about to be put down. She thought she was witnessing her son's liberation. She thought they were about to go to a celebratory lunch at the country club. I didn't see Tinsley Ray inside the courtroom. The judge didn't allow non-parties in for the actual hearing, but I had passed her in the hallway. She was leaning against the wall, scrolling through her phone with a bored expression, one perfectly manicured leg crossed over the other. She didn't look up when I walked past. I was already invisible to her. I was the past. She was the future. I walked to the defendant's table. I was wearing a simple navy dress, no jewelry, my hair pulled back in a severe low bun. I wore flats. I slouched slightly. I had spent an hour in front of the mirror practicing my defeated wife face. I needed to look tired. I needed to look like a woman who had nothing left to fight for. Roz Burke was already there, arranging her files with surgical precision. She didn't look at me, but I saw the corner of her mouth twitch. "Showtime," she whispered, barely moving her lips. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. "The Honorable Judge Margaret Thorne presiding." Judge Thorne swept into the room. She was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair cut in a sensible bob and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. She had a reputation for being tough, fair, and having zero tolerance for histrionics. She had seen every trick, every lie, and every attempt at hiding assets. She sat down, adjusted her robes, and opened the file. "Sterling versus Sterling," she announced, her voice echoing slightly. "Final dissolution hearing. I understand the parties have reached an agreement." Arthur Pendleton stood up, buttoning his jacket. He exuded confidence. "Yes, Your Honor. My client, Mr. Preston Sterling, is generously assuming all marital assets, including the family residence, the Sterling Group business entities, and all associated vehicles. In exchange, Ms. Vance, formerly Mrs. Sterling, will receive a one-time cash settlement of $50,000 and retain her personal effects." Judge Thorne paused. She looked over her glasses at the paperwork, then at me, her eyebrows knit together. $50,000, she asked, "for a marriage of 15 years, involving a substantial real estate business." "That is correct, Your Honor," Arthur said smoothly. "Mrs. Sterling, excuse me, Ms. Vance, wishes to expedite the process. She has declined to seek alimony or a share of the business equity." Judge Thorne turned her gaze on me. It felt like a spotlight. This was the dangerous part. Judges have a duty to ensure equity. If she smelled coercion, if she thought I was being bullied, she could stop the proceedings and order a full financial audit. That would ruin everything. "Ms. Vance," Judge Thorne said, "please stand." I stood up slowly, keeping my eyes on the table for a moment before meeting hers. "Ms. Vance, I need to confirm that you understand what you are agreeing to today. You are relinquishing your claim to what appears to be substantial property, the family home, a business you reportedly helped manage for a decade. Are you certain this is what you want?" I clasped my hands in front of me to hide a tremor, a fake one, but effective. "Yes, Your Honor," I said softly. "I understand." "You are represented by competent counsel," the judge noted, glancing at Roz. "Ms. Burke, have you advised your client on the potential value of these assets?" Roz stood, her face a mask of professional resignation. "I have, Your Honor. We have discussed the forensic valuation extensively. However, my client has instructed me that her priority is a clean break. She does not wish to engage in a protracted legal battle." Judge Thorne looked back at me. She studied my face, searching for signs of fear. "Is anyone pressuring you to sign this, Ms. Vance? Are you afraid of your husband?" I looked at Preston. He was watching me with a look of benevolent boredom. He wanted me to say yes, just so he could deny it. He wanted to be the magnanimous winner. I looked back at the judge. "No, Your Honor, I'm not afraid. I want him to have everything he asked for. I want this to be over so I can focus on my son. Peace is worth more to me than the house." The judge held my gaze for a long, agonizing silence. I could see her debating whether to intervene. Finally, she sighed. "Very well. If the court finds the agreement is entered into voluntarily, I will not stand in the way. Let's proceed to the signatures." The clerk brought the documents to our tables. It was a thick stack: the marital settlement agreement, the asset transfer deeds, the waiver of alimony. Preston signed with a flourish. Scritch-scratch. He signed fast, flipping pages without reading them, eager to get to the champagne waiting on ice at La Mason **. He was smiling at Arthur, probably making a joke about how easy this was. I signed slowly, deliberately. Every stroke of my pen was a lock snapping shut on his cage. Mallory Vance. Mallory Vance. Then came the addendum. It was the final document in the stack. Exhibit C, liability disclosure and assumption of debt. Roz handed it to the clerk, who walked it over to the defendant's table. Arthur Pendleton took it. He adjusted his glasses. He was a good lawyer, Arthur. He wasn't part of the con, he was just doing his job. He started to read the header. I watched his face. First, confusion. He frowned, leaning in closer to the paper. He flipped back to the previous page, then forward again. Then his face went slack. The color drained out of his cheeks. He put a hand on Preston's arm. Preston was already reaching for the pen, ready to sign the last page. "Wait," Arthur whispered. It was loud enough to carry in the quiet room. "What?" Preston asked, annoyed. "Give me the pen, Art, let's go." "Preston, don't sign that," Arthur hissed, more urgently now. "Why?" Preston laughed, a short barking sound. "It's just the wrap-up, right?" "Read the header," Arthur said, his voice straining to stay professional. "This isn't an asset schedule. It's a liability disclosure. It details the encumbrances attached to the assets you're claiming." "So," Preston rolled his eyes, "so there's a mortgage, I know that, I pay it." "No," Arthur said. "Preston, look at the numbers." Preston huffed, snatched the document from Arthur, and looked down. I held my breath. This was it, the moment. I watched Preston's eyes scan the page. Item 1, primary residence. Estimated value, $850,000. Lien 1, Chase Bank, $380,000. Lien 2, HELOC, $345,000. Lien 3, private hard money loan, $355,000. Total equity, negative $230,000. I saw his brow furrow. He blinked, as if the numbers were a foreign language. He moved his finger down the page. Item 2, Sterling Group business accounts. Outstanding vendor debt, $125,000. Unpaid payroll taxes, IRS lien pending, $88,000. Equipment leases in default, $72,000. Revolving credit line, maxed, $200,000. Item 3, personal liabilities assumed by sole party. Gambling debts, Caesars DraftKings, $78,000. Cryptocurrency investment loans, $180,000. Total net worth of transferred estate, negative $1.9 million. Preston stood up so abruptly, his heavy oak chair shrieked against the floor. "What is this?" he demanded. His voice wasn't smooth anymore. It was high, tight, and panicked. "These numbers are wrong." Judge Thorne looked up, annoyed. "Mr. Sterling, please sit down." "No," Preston pointed a shaking finger at me. "She manipulated the documents. This is fraud. She's making up numbers." "Your Honor," Roz stood up, cool as a cucumber. "Those figures are supported by certified bank statements, lien searches, and tax records. They are accurate to the penny as of this morning." "I didn't agree to this," Preston shouted. He looked at Arthur. "I didn't agree to take the debt. I agreed to take the asterisk business." "Mr. Sterling," Judge Thorne's voice was like a whip crack. "The business is the debt. You cannot separate the asset from its liability. If you take the house, you take the mortgage. If you take the company, you take the bills." "But I didn't know." Preston looked around the courtroom, wild-eyed. He looked at Genevieve, who was clutching her pearls, her mouth open in horror. "I didn't know it was this bad. She hid it from me." "She was your bookkeeper," Judge Thorne snapped. "Are you telling this court that you, the CEO of Sterling Group, do not know the financial state of your own company?" Preston stammered. He looked at the paper again. The reality was crashing down on him. The gambling debts, the secret loans, the things he thought he had buried. "She cooked the books, she must have." Arthur Pendleton cleared his throat. He looked miserable. "Your Honor," I should note for the record, I advised my client to conduct an independent financial audit prior to this hearing. Preston whipped his head around to stare at his own lawyer. "Shut up, Arthur." "He declined," Arthur continued, speaking to the judge and ignoring Preston. He signed a waiver against counsel's advice because he wanted to expedite the proceedings. Arthur pulled a document from his briefcase. The waiver. The one Preston had signed without reading because Tinsley told him she wanted the divorce done before their trip to Cabo. Judge Thorne took the waiver. She read it. She looked at Preston over her spectacles. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice terrifyingly calm, "is this your signature?" Preston looked at the paper. He looked at me. For the first time in 3 years, I let the mask drop. I stopped slouching. I raised my chin. And I smiled. Not a nice smile. A smile that said, checkmate. "Yes," Preston whispered. "Then you assumed this risk voluntarily," Judge Thorne said. "You had the opportunity to investigate. You chose not to. You demanded the assets. You have them." "I want to withdraw," Preston said, desperation creeping into his voice. "I withdraw the agreement. I want to split everything 50-50. Roz laughed. It was a sharp, short sound. "Your Honor, my client would be happy to split the debt 50-50. Is that what Mr. Sterling is asking for? To share the $2 million liability?" Preston froze. He did the math. Half of -$2 million is still -$1 million. "No," he gasped. "No, I don't want the debt." "Then you don't get the assets," Judge Thorne said. "But we have a signed agreement. You just signed it. The court accepts the agreement as written." She banged her gavel. It sounded like a gunshot. "Judgment is entered. The marriage is dissolved. Mr. Sterling retains all assets and liabilities listed in Exhibit C. Ms. Vance receives $50,000. Court is adjourned." The silence that followed was heavy. Preston sank back into his chair. He looked like he had been physically struck. He stared at the papers in front of him, the papers that were now a millstone around his neck. I stood up. I smoothed my navy dress. I picked up my purse. I walked over to the defendant's table. Arthur Pendleton wouldn't look at me. He was busy shoving papers into his briefcase, eager to escape the blast zone. But Preston looked up. His eyes were red, watery, and full of shock. "You knew," he rasped. "You knew the whole time." "I was your wife, Preston," I said quietly. "I knew everything, even the things you thought you hid in the dark." "You ruined me," he whispered. I leaned in close, so only he could hear. "No, Preston, you ruined yourself. I just let you sign the receipt." I turned and walked away. "Mallory," he shouted after me. "Mallory, you can't do this." I didn't stop. I walked down the center aisle, past Genevieve. She wasn't smiling anymore. She was staring at her son, doing mental calculations about how much this was going to cost her asterisk. I pushed open the heavy double doors and stepped into the hallway. Tinsley Ray was there. She pushed off the wall when she saw me, flipping her hair. "Finally," she said, popping her gum. "Is it done? Did he get the house?" I stopped. I looked at her, really looked at her. The expensive yoga pants, the designer bag, the youth, the arrogance. She had no idea she was waiting for a man who was technically homeless. "Yes," I said pleasantly. "He got the house, and the business, and everything that comes with them." Her face lit up. "Awesome." "He's all yours, Tinsley," I said. "Every single penny of him." I walked past her toward the elevators. Behind me, the courtroom doors opened. I heard Preston's voice, raised in panic, shouting at Arthur. I heard Genevieve screeching. Tinsley's smile faltered. She looked at me, then looked through the glass window of the courtroom door. She saw Preston's face, pale, sweating, screaming. She saw the disaster. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors slid shut, the last thing I saw was Tinsley Ray's face as the realization hit her. The sugar daddy was broke. The ATM was out of order. The doors closed. I descended to the ground floor in silence. When the doors opened, I walked out of the courthouse and into the bright, blinding April sunshine. The air smelled like spring. It smelled like exhaust fumes and blooming tulips and hot dog carts. It smelled like freedom. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs. I checked my bank account on my phone. The $50,000 transfer from the escrow account had already cleared. The trust fund for Caleb was secure. I was 34 years old. I was divorced. I was starting over. And for the first time in 15 years, I didn't owe a single person a damn thing. The collapse happened faster than I expected. Gravity, as it turns out, is a cruel mistress when you've built your life on a foundation of lies. I thought it might take a year for Preston Sterling to hit rock bottom. I thought he might struggle, flail, perhaps sell off a few assets to keep the lights on. I underestimated just how fragile his ego really was and how quickly rats abandon a sinking ship. It took exactly 2 weeks for Tinsley Ray to leave. I heard the details from a neighbor who still texted me. Apparently, Tinsley had come home to the mansion one afternoon to find a process server tapping a foreclosure notice to the front door. The notice listed the 3 mortgages, the arrears, and the pending auction date. She didn't even unpack her bags. She reportedly went into the kitchen, the one she had insisted on painting that soulless, builder-grade gray, and wrote a note on the back of a utility bill. "This isn't what I signed up for. Good luck." She left the note on the island, packed her Louis Vuitton duffel, and was back on Bumble before her Uber hit the end of the driveway. Tinsley Ray was a mercenary. I had to give her credit for efficiency. She saw the balance sheet, realized the ROI was negative, and liquidated her position. Preston didn't just lose a girlfriend, he lost his audience. And without an audience, Preston Sterling ceased to exist. Within a month, the Sterling empire was being picked apart by vultures. The vendors he had stiffed, the electricians, the lumber yards, the concrete guys, filed a cascade of lawsuits. The line of credit was frozen. The bank seized the company trucks. The mansion sat on the market, but because the debt on it, $1.1 million, was higher than the value, $850,000, it was a short sale nightmare. No one wanted to touch it. The lawn I used to manicure meticulously began to die. The pool turned green. The house started to look exactly like its owner, impressive from a distance, but rotting from the inside out. And Genevieve, the queen mother of the Sterling dynasty. Her fall was quieter, but just as devastating. The country club gossip mill is vicious, and Genevieve had spent decades feeding it. Now she was the meal. I heard that her annual Christmas newsletter was very short that year. Usually, it was a 4-page humble brag about Preston's awards and vacations. This year, it was a single paragraph. Preston is exploring exciting new opportunities in debt restructuring and consulting. We appreciate everyone's privacy during this transition. Translation: my son is broke and I am mortified. While their world was burning, the parallel conflicts in my life resolved themselves with a kind of poetic symmetry. Harper Finch called me about 3 weeks after the hearing. I stared at the phone buzzing on my coffee table. The screen flashed asterisk, Harper people female asterisk. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message. Her voice was shaking, thick with tears. "Mal, please pick up. I had no idea things were this bad. I swear I thought Preston was just stressed. I never meant to hurt you. I miss you. Can we talk?" I listened to the message once, then I deleted it. There was a time when I would have called her back. I would have soothed her, told her I understood, made excuses for her betrayal. But that Mallory, the Mallory who apologized for taking up space, was gone. She had died in a courtroom on a Thursday morning. Some bridges aren't meant to be repaired. Some friendships don't deserve a second act. 20 years of history had been traded for a wink and empty promises from a man who used everyone he touched. Harper was waiting for Preston to notice her now that Tinsley was gone. She'd be waiting a long time. Preston didn't want a woman who knew him when he was nobody. He needed a woman who reflected who he pretended to be. I blocked her number. It was a small tap of a finger, but it felt like cutting an anchor chain. Genevieve tried a different approach. She went through Caleb. She started texting him, asking for loans. Small amounts at first. "Grandma forgot her wallet, sweetie. Can you Venmo me $50? Then, "Your father is having a hard time. Maybe you could help with groceries." That was the line. I took Caleb's phone. I texted her back myself. "Genevieve, if you ask my 15-year-old son for money again, I will send the forensic accounting files to every member of your bridge club. Do not test me." She never texted again. But the most important repair wasn't with them. It was with my son. Caleb had been quiet during the move. He watched the chaos from a distance, processing the collapse of his father's image. He saw the "for sale" signs. He heard the hushed phone calls his father made, begging for extensions. He saw Tinsley leave. One evening, about 2 months after the divorce, we were sitting in my new living room. It was raining, a soft, rhythmic patter against the window. "Mom," he asked. He was holding a video game controller, but the TV was paused. "Yeah." "Did you know?" he asked. "Did you know he was going to lose everything?" I put down my book. I looked at him, really looked at him. He looked older. The divorce had forced him to grow up too fast, and I hated Preston for that. "I knew the math, Caleb," I said gently. "I knew that you can't spend money you don't have forever. Eventually, the bill comes due." "He called me yesterday," Caleb said, looking at the floor. "He asked if you had any money left over from the settlement." My blood ran cold. Preston was trying to scavenge crumbs from his own son. "Caleb, listen to me." I got up and went to the small safe I kept in the closet. I pulled out a single document, the trust deed. I sat down next to him on the sofa. "Do you see this?" I pointed to the balance. $520,000. Caleb's eyes went wide. "Whoa, is that yours?" "No," I said, "it's yours." He looked at me, confused. 3 years ago, when I realized what your father was doing, I took my inheritance from Nana Rose and my retirement savings, and I locked it away. It's an irrevocable trust. That means I can't spend it. Your father definitely can't touch it. The bank can't take it. I smoothed his hair back. "Whatever happened to me, whatever happened to the house or the business, I needed to know you would be okay. This is your college. This is your first house. This is your safety net." Caleb stared at the paper. Then he looked at me, his eyes filled with tears. "You stayed," he whispered. "You stayed for 3 years with him, just to save this for me. I would have stayed 100 years if that's what it took to keep you safe." He dropped the controller. He leaned into me, burying his face in my shoulder. He was almost 6 feet tall now, lanky and awkward, but in that moment he was my little boy again. He hugged me so hard it knocked the wind out of me. "I'm sorry I was mean," he mumbled into my shirt. "I'm sorry I believed him." "It's okay," I whispered, holding him tight. "You're safe, we're safe, that's all that matters." 15-year-old boys don't usually hug their mothers voluntarily. I knew then that I had won. Not the money, not the house. I had one asterisk him. My life began to take shape. My $50,000 settlement went toward getting established. First month's rent, security deposit, basic furniture. It wasn't luxury. It was IKEA and thrift store finds, but it was asterisk stability asterisk. I enrolled in the interior design program at the community college, the dream I had put on hold at 23 to help Preston build his empire. I found that I had a knack for it, not the glossy, cold, sterile aesthetic that Preston loved, but something warmer. Lived in, real. I painted my new kitchen sage green. It took me a weekend. I taped the edges, laid the drop cloths, and rolled the paint on myself. It was a soft, earthy color, the color of dried herbs, the color of spring shoots pushing through hard soil. When I finished, I stood in the center of the tiny kitchen, drinking a cup of coffee from a mug that didn't match any of the others. The sun hit the green walls, and the room felt like an exhale. It felt like me. My first real client was a woman named Eileen. She was 52, just ending a 28-year marriage. She had moved into a condo down the street and had seen a flyer I put up at the grocery store. When I walked into her place, it was empty, boxes everywhere. Eileen was standing in the middle of the living room, looking lost. She looked the way I had felt in the guest room. "I don't know where to start," Eileen told me, wringing her hands. "I've never decorated a room by myself. My husband, he always chose everything." I smiled. I touched her arm. "We start with one thing," I said. One thing that makes you happy, one color that is just for you. Yellow, she said, a small smile breaking through. I've always wanted a yellow breakfast nook. He said it was tacky. Then we are going to make the sunniest, brightest, tackiest yellow breakfast nook this city has ever seen, I declared. We painted it the next day. Eileen cried when she saw it. Happy tears, she promised. It looks like hope. Helping Eileen reclaim her space helped me reclaim my soul. I realized I wasn't just decorating rooms. I was helping women build sanctuaries where they couldn't be hurt again. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, there was a knock at my door. It was a Tuesday evening. I was sketching a layout for a new client. Caleb was in his room gaming with friends, laughing loudly. I looked through the peephole. My breath hitched. Preston stood in the hallway. I barely recognized him. He had lost weight, and not the healthy kind. His face was gaunt, his skin sallow. There were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and too much scotch. He was wearing a suit, but it was wrinkled. There was a small coffee stain on the lapel, and his left wrist was bare. The $15,000 braidling was gone, sold, presumably. I debated not opening the door, but then I realized I wasn't afraid of him anymore. The monster wasn't under the bed. He was just a sad man in the hallway. I opened the door, but I didn't step back. I blocked the entrance. Hello, Preston. He looked at me. He seemed to be trying to find the old dynamic, trying to summon the arrogance, but the tank was empty. Mallory, he said, his voice was raspy. You look good. I am good, I said. What do you want? He shifted his weight. He looked past me into the apartment. He saw the sage green walls. He saw the cozy rug. He heard Caleb laughing in the back room. I didn't know it was this bad, he said. The business, they're taking everything. The bank is foreclosing on the house next week. I'm staying at my mother. I know, I said. I made mistakes, he said, looking back at me. His eyes were pleading now. I know that now, but I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I didn't mean to hurt you. I leaned against the door frame. You absolutely meant to hurt me, Preston. You meant to discard me. You just didn't expect me to survive it. Can we talk? He asked, taking a half step forward. Maybe we can figure something out. You're good with numbers, Mal. Maybe you can look at the books. Help me find a way out. I almost laughed. The audacity was breathtaking. After everything, the cheating, the stealing, the humiliation, he still thought he could use me. He still thought I was his unpaid fixer. No, I said. He blinked. What? No, I won't look at the books. I won't help you find a way out. You wanted the empire, Preston. You wanted to be the king. Kings go down with their castles. But I have nothing, he whispered. Mallory, I have nothing. You have exactly what you asked for, I said. You wanted the assets, you wanted the credit, you wanted the life without me in it. I put my hand on the doorknob. You're free, Preston. Enjoy it. Mallory, please. Goodbye. I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. Click. I stood there for a moment, listening. I heard him stand there for a long time. I heard him sigh. And then, finally, I heard his footsteps recede down the hallway, slow and heavy. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel guilty. I felt light. I walked back into the living room. I sat down on my thrift store armchair, velvet, mustard yellow, incredibly comfortable. On the shelf next to me sat a wooden box. It was beaten up, grease-stained, and held together with tape. Nana Rose's recipe box, the one thing I had fought Genevieve for on the kitchen floor. I pulled it down. I opened the lid. The smell of old paper and vanilla drifted up. I flipped through the cards. Apple pie, chicken dumplings, Nana's biscuits. And in the back, a photo. A black and white snapshot of Nana Rose in 1955, standing in front of her own small house, wearing this very apron, smiling like she owned the world. I ran my thumb over her face. You were right, Grandma, I whispered to the empty room. Keep your own money, know your worth, and never ever let anyone make you feel small. I looked around my apartment. It was small. It was simple. It was nothing like the mansion on the hill. But every paint color was mine. Every piece of furniture was mine. Every dollar in the bank was mine. I was Mallory Vance. I was a mother. I was a designer. I was a grandmaster. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I was finally completely free.